guys like us who build PC games or console games or whatever it is, if you take those guys and you said, go and build a mobile game, the way you think about mobile game is completely different. But asking someone to jump all the way to VR or AR is a monumental jump. And so I think it's a generational skill set. And I don't think the killer app is going to come from our generation. I think it's some young person who grew up with these devices.
Or don't have the things that hold them back. Yeah. We have too much baggage in a way.
In the same way, like I think that's why Genshin Impact came out of China. That's not going to come out from the US. It's going to come out from places like China because they didn't grow up with PCs. Many of them grew up with just mobile devices. Everything from business model to game design has to be generational and afforded from that perspective.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 4th episode of allchat, a podcast where we're aiming to deliver an unfiltered view behind the scenes of some of the most interesting and current topics within the gaming industry, startups more broadly, and venture capital. Today we will be discussing emerging technology platforms, as we're days away from the initial release of the Apple Vision Pro, injecting newfound excitement and interest into what they're calling spatial computing. As with many platform launches before, games have always been amongst the earliest applications that drive broad consumer adoption, and we are excited to dig into what role games can play in spatial computing and dive deeper into how games have shaped virtual reality and augmented reality to date. I'm excited to be joined by my good friends and former colleagues Thomas Vu, previously the head of creative at Riot Games and the executive producer of Arcane, Stephen Lim, who was previously the executive producer of VALORANT at Riot Games and now co-founder of Raidbase. And finally, there's Brian and myself, partners at Patron, a venture firm leading seed rounds across consumer and gaming startups. Prior to founding Patron, Brian notably helped to source Andreessen Horowitz's initial investment into Oculus, which was acquired by Facebook a few months after the investment. Now let's dive into our discussion about games on emerging platforms. Thank you guys for joining us today. Excited to chat about spatial computing, VR, especially on the eve of Apple launching the Vision Pro. And I guess to kick off, like, what have your experiences been using existing kind of VR hardware over the years, whether it's games, whether it's movies, other stuff? Curious kind of what the baseline is for each of you guys.
Wow, that's like actually coming so soon. February 2nd?
Like literally like in 2 weeks.
Literally in
the 2 weeks.
Okay, that's
pre-order? Let's why don't we start there?
Hell no, it's like $3,500.
Actually, it's actually $3,500 at the base level.
Yeah, the 1 terabyte version, and then the Apple Care makes it like it's like $4,500.
I'm either wrong or right guy.
I think you can get it.
I'm barely in the Apple ecosystem. I'm like Google. I embrace my Google AI overlords.
I just sent you the green bubble text, so yes.
Yeah, I already know who's winning the future battle, and it's not Apple.
I'm actually pretty excited about this device. And look, no one has it yet. Even developers don't have it yet. I think the first dev kits are coming next week. And so, but everything I've heard, my friends who are there, just it's pretty bananas. And I think there's a few things about it that, like when I construct it in my head, like why would anybody want this? I don't think they're going after the gaming market, first of all. Although I do think the gaming market will come to them because at some point, because they're within the Apple ecosystem, every single game on the App Store is going to be on there, naturally, right? Yeah. Obviously, there's probably some kind of like sort of control transference, but we've all seen those like sort of like devices that connect to your iPhone and allow you to use controls. And so I'm assuming that if you have an Xbox controller or PS4 controller, you'll be able to play like Clash of Clans or something. But while I'm super excited about the device because, I think about like the sort of entertainment experience, right? Like. And from everything I've heard, you can literally have an IMAX on your face. And to me, that's kind of like an insane experience at 8K. An IMAX on your face at 8K, watching, I don't know, Gladiator, Lord of the Rings, whatever movie you want, whatever TV show you want. And even though it's expensive.
For 2 hours?
Yeah, for $3,500. Well, the good thing is you can change the occlusion, right? So you can see through, so you don't have to have like this feeling of claustrophobia, which I think oftentimes like traditional VR devices have that issue. But imagine if you're like a business class traveler, right? And you pay like already $5,000 just to fly around. Now for whatever, 8 hours, 15 hours to go to like the Middle East, 12 hours to go to Paris, right? you have essentially your library of Netflix shows and movies that you're watching in an IMAX for 3,500. Like that's all of a sudden that becomes like worth it in my mind, right? Especially if it's 8K, if it's that good. And I think there's a bunch of other features in there that I think people are are probably discounting, which is like being within that Apple ecosystem, you know? I think
I
when
think
I'm using
similarly, like the prospect of building like your own man cave and getting a big TV and audio system
exactly,
and everything, like yeah,
exactly,
there's value
and
there suddenly. Yeah,
and the thing is, when you're in there, you have your iMessage, you have FaceTime, you have all your Apple suite of things, right? So I think it's more of a productivity tool than anything. I think over time they're going to try to replace this. Why have a MacBook when you can have
Yeah.
10 MacBooks, right? And you can access just like your cell phone, mobile, in a super easy way. And one of the features I think that that's going to really surprise people is they have this sort of like we've all seen Blade Runner, right? Where the sort of AI character shows up in person. That's what they have. I forget what they call it. It's like it's a feature. I think it's collaborative something or other. But effectively, instead of FaceTime where it's flat, like we're on screens,
Yeah.
we're flat, right? You're literally in the room with them, and that to me is really bananas. Like being in the room with another person, and I think from my understanding, they have it up to about 80% like holistic, so almost fully encompass that person, which is like pretty bananas. Like having a conversation, and in this situation where we're all working from home, right? Like that becomes pretty interesting to have actually people in a room together. That's actually in the room together. And I think one of the features they have, like they call it parallaxing in it that I've been looking at that I thought was really dope too, is that, you know, if you're using Oculus, everything follows you. You walk around, like everything follows you, right? Everything's
Yeah.
like they can literally put objects into the world, right? And you can walk around it.
Yeah.
And that is a game changer. To me, that becomes now an empty room becomes whatever you want, right? Now just extrapolate like version 2, 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
Like when Stephen talked about the man cave, like your TV's over there, it's always going to be over there. Your your computer's always over there. Your pinball machine, your pool tape, like that's I think going to be where it's going. And I think the first version of it is actually going to be. At first, I was thinking, well, this is version 1. How good it can be? I actually think it's going to exceed people's expectations, even at 35, which is like actually I wouldn't have said that like even 2 or 3 months ago. But as it's getting closer
As you're
and more news
closer.
is coming out, I'm like, whoa, this is like actually beyond what I expected. Based on some of those features. And I think like if you're at a corporation and you're like, instead of a laptop, I just want like this thing so I can use it for just like my laptop. I think companies are willing to put $3,500 because they're already spending that for a video card.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I literally think it's actually they're probably going to sell out. Like
Yeah,
Well,
that's my guess.
that's
it's already sold out. I think the
Oh.
thing for me is like having worked on the original Oculus deal and having owned a lot of actually Quest and the original Oculus headset over the years. Like if you think about the VR headset, it hasn't really changed that much, right? Since it's released, like it's very much the same form factor. And I think that's like the opportunity that Apple's going after is now you don't actually need to hold a controller, which just doesn't feel great if you guys are ever in like a VR experience. It already is cumbersome to wear the headset, but when you have like these extra 2 controllers that are like kind of haptic, but they're not really natural, I think it really gets in the way. I think for V1, my question would be like, how heavy is the headset? Because actually that's like one of the things that really deters most people from continuing to use VR, right? Is like the fact that you have to wear this thing, it's like strapped to your head, it gets really hot. And I think for something like gaming where you want to be in there for like, if you're like hardcore gamer, you're spending thousands of hours on a title, like that's just really hard, I think, to do with Oculus. So
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I,
I think it's just the question is
I,
like, how can they fix that form factor? Because even with
I,
V1, it feels like it's going to be pretty heavy, at least from what I can see.
I think the solution that Apple had, and I think it's a smart solution, is it's the computer's not in the headset. It's in that device that's connected to the headset. So you notice that they have that thing that connects to like a little
Yeah.
box.
Mm-hmm.
Like so with with Oculus is all in that headset. So you're
I
carrying.
thought they highlighted that this does have like the M chip or something. Doesn't it have in there?
But is it in the headset or is it in the box?
I think it's in. Oh, that. I think it's in
I
the
don't know.
headset.
I don't know.
I don't
But
know
I know
either.
that,
We
that
should
there's
find out right now.
there's a cable that comes out and
Yeah.
connects to
It's like a
this device
battery or
thing,
device or something. Yeah.
That's already so Sandbox VR, out of home VR theater, effectively. Like they've gone to this like custom things, HTC product where the computer is moved away from. It originally was like a backpack, and then it was like in the headset, and then now it's like it's basically distributed across your body so that the form factor is something you can actually wear for like 20, 30 minutes. But I think Brian's point is spot on, and also the initial use cases around games requiring short sessions, movies being like movie clips effectively, or like movie scenes, not like full movies. It's because it's like very disorienting for people to like have it on and then be in that world for more than like 20, 30 minutes. Like you'll have like the VR fatigue, you'll feel nausea, etc. And so it does feel like a lot of the early developers for it were trying to build entertainment, and it was always limited to these like shorter sessions because of the user experience. But it does seem like Apple is trying to move away from purely like entertainment will still be developed for it and you can access the content, but can they actually make it into something that you use instead of a laptop, instead of your phone in many cases, and actually just like use it as a device that you work on, you collaborate on, etc. And I think that's the big question. Like how much of that side will develop, and what are the applications and productivity tools and use cases? Does it actually make people more productive, and is it actually comfortable for those?
As a generally like skeptical, as a person who's generally skeptical about the waves of VR that have come, I generally have that intuition because as a pragmatic person too, like looking for pragmatic solutions, that AR seem to intuitively have more promise.
Yep.
And on that front, they clearly have addressed a lot of the issues there and have pushed in that direction. There are some things that are like pretty obvious limitations from as powerful as the M chip may be, like is it powerful enough for some of these applications? Battery life is always a thing. Like I believe it was something like 2 hours or something like that. That's like pretty limited. That may not even be long enough to see like their recent movie that they made. They made like the recent Apple movie that they're pushing on Apple TV.
Flower Killers of Flower Moon.
Yeah.
The Leo movie.
Like,
Scorsese.
Their battery isn't even long enough for that, for their own movie. So that's like some obvious stuff. Yes, you can be plugged in while you're doing it. And there's like workarounds and stuff. And all of that just tells me like, the fact that Apple's even doing this shows a level of commitment. They're not going to half-ass it. They're going to be head and shoulders above many other attempts on a bunch of UI issues, or that's what we should all expect. Yeah. But it's still all like a transitionary phase, a very obvious transitionary phase. And they, as a result of that, looking at an arm's length as like not someone in the Apple ecosystem, like not wholeheartedly embraced the Apple ecosystem yet. They did something unusual here. This is the first product they did that seems the most prototypey. Like, they didn't have fast iPod. That's like straight away usable. iPhone straight away usable.
Apple Watch 1 was pretty bad.
Okay. I didn't have Apple Watch 1.
Yeah.
But that certainly is now like ubiquitous and integrated more in their system. Still, I wonder how useful the watch really is for people and how much of it is like fashion versus like utility and stuff like that. But that's like what I question of all of Apple. But still, it clearly they have like the command and the dedication to make that better, which I'm really glad for. I kind of just want to like skip ahead to, and this is all I can foresee. So I'm not particularly imaginative on this front, but in the renderings that have been offered to me, I want the Matrix where I'm just plugged in and I don't even know, or I want the holodeck where I'm just in there messing with people and I don't even know. I love that fantasy, but as long as I don't even want the Ready Player One version where like I'm still attached to this thing and other people are like yelling at me in real life, like either we're all in the soup or I'm just in my own vacuum in my like in my holodeck dungeon. So like but that's all I can kind of imagine right now with my limited, creative brain.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all other people can imagine because we see only like variants of those things, right? Or steps towards those things. But either way, it feels so far off to that ultimate fantasy, and all these feel like half measures that I'm glad like billionaires are like motivated to fund. But it's felt very like cart before the horse for a long time, and that's what makes me continue to be like cautious at best, not skeptical all the way, but like cautious at best. Like I'm always generally skeptical of a tech looking for a problem and people having to like shove down your throat like this is why you want it. And the case has not been the intermediate cases have not been so compelling yet.
Yeah.
Yes, I would love to watch movies in HD on the plane as much as the next guy, but $3,500 like that much, or like for the average person and whatnot, or even the $1,000 version, or even the $500 version, like it's going to be really unapproachable for a lot of people for a long time. And arguably with the Quest and stuff like that, they've hit price points that you can do that already today at like lower res and slightly lesser quality of life and experience. But at least there's something there. But even still now, like I've taken the last 100 flights. Have I seen anyone with a Meta Quest on their head? Not even once. Have you, guys? I don't know. Are people going to start doing that? Maybe they'll start doing it with the Apple Vision Pro because now it's like a fashion statement or whatever. Like,
we have the eye now, right? So people can actually see your eyeball instead of the.
I'll just wear ski goggles and pretend like.
Yeah, you see the dead eye just like go from this to like.
No, but I think.
What do you want?
I think Steve brings a good point, which is the screen, right? Like if their screen is just like step function better, where wearing that is actually better than having like a 80-inch OLED in your house, or it's comparable. Let's just say, I think if it can like somehow justify like the fidelity, because I think that's the other issue with like VR goggles. I don't know if you guys have tried latest Oculus and stuff, but to me like the fidelity isn't like really there. It's always like it feels a little bit fuzzy, it's a little bit off. So yeah, I wonder if like
theoretically is even the Meta Quest 2 or 3, is that better than this like 10-inch screen that you have in front of your seat on a flight? Probably. But again, and even at a lower price point, why haven't I even seen one person do it?
I don't know the price point, and that's the argument that a lot of people make. And Meta said, like, hey, we want to make it accessible for all. The reality is, like, iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max cost like $1,500, $1,700, $1,900. So, like, Apple clearly isn't, like, that is not necessarily a niche product. There's clearly a lot of people around the world, like, buying iPhones. And
they also carry a weight and a fashion
Pro,
premium that, like, other people don't, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think there will always be, like, different segments and different, like, price points, but I don't know that. I think there's some sticker shock on 3,500 because you're anchoring on 500 or 400 or whatever HTC or Meta's been doing. But the reality is like that wasn't necessarily going to be the resting final cost of a VR device, especially if you think that in the future it replaces a laptop or an iPad or your phone. Yeah. Then the expectation is that.
Yeah, the comp is definitely productivity, like iPhone, iPad, MacBook. Yeah, I think the reason why you haven't seen people, and by the way, I've seen one person, and it was silly, on a plane with an Oculus.
Yourself doesn't count, by the way.
No, that if that's the case, it'd be two people. It'd be two people at that point. Then, I see myself. No, I look. I think people aren't using. And by the way, the number of VR devices out there quietly is like bananas. I think it's like something like 75 million
between Sony. Between Sony and
it's a real number, and but I do think that one of the biggest challenges is resolution. They're also using technology that's like 70s technology. It's the same as what you see in 3D in the movie theaters. Like this technology has not changed, and it does give you headaches. And if you can't, unless you're perfectly adapted to it, it's not like a form function that's natural to you. It really isn't. Like, and that's where I think it struggles. Like, and in that struggle, like if you can't even develop in it, if you can't be in it for very long, how are you going to develop in it, right? And on top of it, the pass through. Nobody wants something on their head that is like you can't pass through. Although I would have to say the new Quest, the pass through is actually pretty good. but it's still artificial. It's like watching a night
Yeah,
camera,
it's a
right?
hazy. It's a
Versus
pass-through stuff.
it is, yeah. Versus actually like it's just sunglasses, right? Like I think it's a very different experience.
Did you try
Um,
Magic Leap? Did Magic Leap ever
Never
any
should.
good
no,
at this
I did
stuff?
try Magic Leap. I actually went there and met with the team, and unfortunately they showed me a demo and they're like, it's real. I'm like, it's not real. Like, come on. Like, I watched their Professor Gorox or whatever, and I'm like, that's not real. They were trying to convince me a game developer that was real. Like, that's not real. Um, yeah, I mean, like it's very far behind. Like, I think, again, I haven't used the Vision Pro yet, but from folks artists and folks that I trust that have used it are like, holy cow, this is bananas. And again, who knows, right? Maybe they're just enamored by it. So
Yeah. What about the gaming stuff, guys? Like, I mean, obviously that's a space that you're very familiar with, but even in AR, it's like, Pokemon Go is probably the one game that's really done well. But it just like since then, there just really hasn't been like a breakout AR or VR title. I guess you have the Beat Sabers and some of this other stuff that's like paid games. But like, what do you think it takes before AR and VR gets to like the level of popularity, engagement, and again, like I think the headset sales is one thing. Like I'd be more curious about like the actual engagement, like people usage
Yeah.
and like how long they use it and like the hours behind these devices. Like, what do you think it takes to like kind of build like a League of Legends level outcome? Or I guess Pokemon Go was that outcome, but outside of like not having that IP, like what do you think is preventing it from getting people to like play on AR and VR that we've been expecting people to play over the last like decade?
I think one obstacle is at an abstraction above AR VR in that I probably will get yelled at this, but there's a sense that a lot of us gamers talk about where you go home, after a long day at work or school or whatever, and you want to play games and hang out with the homies, and you want to play something, but you open up Steam and you get on Discord and you're like, oh, there's nothing to play, and you have that feeling, even though at any given moment technically there's more games than ever that you could play, but you don't actually open all those and you go by default to some game that you've been playing for the past year. We call that feeling gamer depression. So what we
it's 4,000
happen to call it.
games shipped on Steam
Yeah,
every
that
year.
you don't feel like playing. 15,000 last year from what I saw. So there's some like dissonance there. And so maybe as a result of that, we have this perpetual never-ending feeling of like, why isn't there something new? There's new stuff technically all the time. Is the stuff being delivered new enough? That's like a valid question. Or is stuff actually inventive and new that we aren't willing to try? It's something else that I think gamers do not often want to acknowledge, but I think it's actually a dynamic where I felt over time, both of Thomas and I worked on Spore where we met, and Spore was new on a lot of fronts. And I think in hindsight, when I look at it, it's too new on a bunch of things. I think there's some threshold where it goes from new and innovative to overwhelming or unfamiliar.
Unfamiliar. Yeah,
And I think when it's unfamiliar, I believe that gamers are smarter than average like groups of consumers. Of course, I have bias there, but I think in that perspective, we won't blame ourselves for that dissonance. We're going to blame the developer. Like, this is weird. This is not intuitive. Say whatever, but basically it's too unfamiliar. It's too out there. And if that holds any water, maybe that could be an explanation for, or one of the reasons, or one of the obstacles for adoption of AR VR. It's too unfamiliar. It's too out there. And you would think that, well, its job is duplicating or replicating reality, and reality is our reality, and that's what we should be so familiar with. So how much of a leap is it? Maybe that leap is too far, or maybe that leap hasn't been closed enough per our earlier conversation, but maybe it all just is too unfamiliar right now. So we've been gaming in a certain format for a long time. Transitions to new devices and formats, like they do come. Nintendo has been one of the most successful pushing like new devices and new paradigms for a long time. They also have a nice I guess brand along with Apple that people are much more willing to try and assume it's good and be wanting it to be good. Versus some of the ones pushing VR AR right now are have less trust. Like I'll just call out like Meta. Like how much do I want Meta to be the one to like push AR VR? Like even if it's really a really good experience, the subtext is, do I really want to like log in to Facebook before I use this like AR product? And that maybe is another obstacle is like the ones that are pushing this who are rich enough to like pursue this. How much do I really trust them to be the ones to provide it? That's where again maybe Apple has a humongous leg, and just the fact that they can sell out $3,500 and times 85,000 units or whatever it was within 18 minutes. Like that's I think all those things are included to reduce the barrier to entry. It's like partially trust as an obstacle, partially unfamiliarity as an obstacle, and then there's the big elephant in the room. It's like there's still not a killer app, and the prospect of devoting enough energy to proposing a killer app is pretty monumental. In the 5-6 years ago, whenever it was that VR had like a wave, you had a number of excited game developers to like push and try. And since, very little of it has ever gotten any meaningful traction. So now all the rest of us still making games are like, do I want to do that now in like 2024? No, this is a big giant caveat here is like all the people who went over to Meta and are like developing games in flight that we can't see right now. But like in terms of independent studios or established studios making VR games, all that dried the hell up. It's all like, now we have 5 or 6 years of perspective, still didn't happen. Now you're like, if you want to pitch a VR product, it's like, dude, it's already hard enough to get something approved now. Now you want to add VR as a layer of obstacle to like a stakeholder. And it's like, it's kind of in this rut. So there are plenty of obstacles here that kind of like keep it from this like in this false start state. But yet, there are there's like hugely meaningful funding and efforts going toward it. Apple coming in is going to be a huge boost that might revitalize a lot of it. But quietly, Valve and Meta has still not stopped. They've like maintained a humongous amount of investment internally, and yet we're all still like kind of waiting for like enough critical mass to like get past. And maybe Apple will have that critical mass to jolt everyone back into excitement and action. So far, Valve and Meta have been in a steady state, and they have shipped a lot of units. But what have people been playing VR besides Beat Saber? And how much can you play Beat Saber?
Yeah, well, I think VR.
I got a lot of Tarkov to play.
VR, you can make the argument that it's kind of like the PDA still, right? Like there hasn't been an iPhone yet, so you're still playing with the device that just isn't there yet. But everyone has a phone, right? And a lot of people play Pokemon Go, and I think Thomas, you and I talked about this at Riot at one point, which is like, what kind of games can you make more on the AR plus like the smartphones that we have? Like, I guess, do you guys have a take as game developers on why AR just, again, like in theory, like that's something that we already use, right? The camera, a lot of people are on Instagram and TikTok. Like, why is it that AR is actually not really taken off from like a gaming perspective?
AR has a little bit of has a forced pacing to it. You can only move so fast through the world. So once I'm at a place, there's like a lot of things I can do at that place maybe, and that's kind of maybe how Pokemon Go is. Like while I'm here, there's like an animal I can catch, or a thing I can do, but like how long until the next place I can move to that has a different thing? 20, 30 minutes or hour, or if I even remember to bring it up again, there's at least that layer. Yeah.
My take, and I largely agree with Stephen. I think we need to separate like VR and AR. Like oftentimes we keep saying VR, AR. I think they're so different in terms of like what their utility is and why people are in these spaces. So, and I think it's smart that Apple is like not doing VR, right? It's just not a VR device.
Well,
Like,
yeah, they're telling everyone to call it spatial computing, and they're always like super
yeah.
paranoid about marketing, right? So it makes sense that they're trying to move
Yeah.
into that.
Because I really do think it's super different. It's as different as like mobile to console to PC, right? Like completely different form factors, completely different interface. Um, so that's the first thing. I think the primarily the reason why the killer app hasn't been made is a lot of what Steven said. I totally agree with that, which is the best developers in the world are not taking the time to do experiments on these devices. It's just the we're so discerning about, like you said, there's like 15,000 games that were shipped on Steam last year. We're so discerning about the games that we play and the time that we spend in these games, and we're so precious about it that like if it's not like perfect, if it's not new, if it's not fresh, if it doesn't give you something new, I think it's very difficult for any of us to spend that time. And I think the sort of idea of like newness, there's this idea which is like you can only love what you know, right? Like if you don't know it, how can you fall in love with it? And I think if somebody is building something that's so far out there, it's really hard for like the general population to like bridge their minds. So I totally agree with Slim. I do think that there is an affordance and an interface issue because I think oftentimes, and this is where my take on like why people haven't built it is, I think it's generational. Like guys like us who build PC games or console games or whatever it is, like if you take those guys and you said go and build a mobile game, it's like literally like what? Like the way you think about mobile game is completely different. And arguably it's not that big of a jump, but asking someone to do that, to jump all the way to VR or AR is a monumental jump. And so I think it's a generational like skill set. And I don't think the killer app is going to come from our generation. I don't think it's like going to be like the people coming out of the big
Yeah,
AAA
it'll
game
be
studios that are going
startups.
to build that. Yeah, I think it's some young person who
Yeah.
grew up with these devices
Or don't
glued
have
to
the
their
things that
head.
hold them back.
Yeah.
Exactly, and
That
that's all
we
they
have
can
too
think
much
about.
baggage in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, in the same way, like I think that's why Genshin Impact came out of China. It's like that's not going to come out from the U.S. It's going to come
Yeah.
out from a place
Yeah.
like China because they grew up with. They didn't grow up with PCs. They grew up with, well, many of them did, but many of them grew up with just mobile devices, right? And I think a lot of the like everything from business model to game design has to be generational and affordant from that perspective. And so I'm very wary when a developer is like, "Hey, I have this crazy idea for doing VR." I'm like, do you VR like every day,
Yeah.
all day long? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Unless that's what you do and you're like totally in like like that's just your nature. You're now affordant. You're completely one with it. I think it's going to be hard. And so every single thing that I've seen, other than the things that maybe work, both in AR and VR, like Pokemon Go, or um, Beat Saber is like completely affordant to the controls. And so we're applying all these like design principles of like walking in VR. Like it makes zero sense. Why are you walking in VR? It just
Yeah.
doesn't feel right, right? Like, and because we apply all the game design knowledge that we have from making like first person shooters and MOBAs and like all
Yeah.
these games into a form factor that we have zero
Well,
idea on
it's
how
like
to.
whenever new technology comes out, the easiest thing to do is and Chris Dixon called like the skeuomorphic, the port. It's like when
Yeah,
NFTs first became popular, like how do we make Fortnite with NFTs? How do we make League with NFTs? And it's like, well, like that's
yeah,
missing the point. Like the technology
exactly.
enables you to actually do something different. Like you need to build something that's native to the use of that technology.
Yeah,
And
and
I think,
beyond native,
yeah.
that's the part that's hard. Like if we went back and we saw Geocities, it was a bunch of magazine covers as websites. That's what they thought the web was, right? Nobody could conceive that the web is like so much more,
So much more.
right? Like so much more than bulletin boards and whatnot. But
Yeah.
that
At the
generation,
same
that's
time, it's
all they
like,
could do.
yeah, and at the same time, it is natural too. Like you guys, hearing you guys talk about this, it does bring to mind too the two things we could name as like big successes: Pokemon Go in AR, and then Beat Saber in VR, they were both, I think, hard carried by their IPs too.
Yeah.
What is Pokemon Go without Pokemon? Like it.
I mean, even with Harry Potter, it failed, and every other company that got funded to build a Pokemon Go for X.
And I would, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, the IP, but Pokemon Go was before that was that game.
Ingress.
Yeah. And I think
And that was interesting for like 5,000 people. But then
Yeah.
Pokemon Go, like,
Exactly.
like you know, yeah.
But from a affordance perspective, it was effectively geocaching, right? So there was like this ARG that was it's geocaching where people hide things all over the world, and there's like a massive audience that goes and finds these things. It's effectively that,
it's a perfect IP.
but done in a way that has great
IP.
IP. Yeah. But it's completely affordant. There's nothing about that is outside of the realm of mobile, right? Like they're not trying to have controls. They're not trying to do any of these things, right? It's all perfectly affordant with the device and with the AR. And same with Beat Saber. You're standing still, right? Like you're just swinging your arms. It's very much like it works because it's so clearly made for it. And I think anybody working in those devices should really take that to heart, And I think it's going to be a generational thing. I go watch my daughter.
Yeah.
So I have a Quest, and I don't use the Quest as much as she does. She's like literally hacking it apart, playing like Roblox with it. Like she's like hardcore. Like every time I walk in the room, she's like on the device, and I'm like, you know what? In 5 years, she's gonna be old enough where she's gonna be like, I want to make a thing, and it's gonna be awesome. And
There's
I'm
an
certain of
equivalent
it
of that
because
for my kids. My kids, we don't have VR in the house or AR in the house, but my kids use Google Home like more than almost anything. Their interface is a natural language, like what's the population of whatever, and like I hear like, what are you asking about? And like that's like normal to them, and so they're not like leashed to like our like we go straight to like Google. I have to like I have to like force myself to like switch over to Bard recently, and like but
I
they
was
do it
with
so
a founder
naturally.
recently, and he's like, I've never used email. I'm like, never used email. I'm like, that's bananas.
It's only Slack.
Yeah, he's like Slack, Discord. Like my daughters don't like using email. Email is for school. Everything else is Discord, Slack, all this stuff. So their paradigm is completely different than ours. And there's literally no way of us ever breaching that unless we ourselves stop using and reprogramming our brain, right? And for me, largely, I've actually gotten less and less email because of this.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's.
I mean, there's an abstraction layer that is in common between all those. Like it's the desire to connect and communicate, and the tool is what changes over time. So I wonder if what you can do is project out from like a classic motivation or a classic compulsion, and translate to the new tool. But again, so far it feels so forced. It's like we have this tool and maybe you can use it for this thing that you've always wanted to do, instead of like, I wanted this thing and this thing so obviously makes it better.
Much better.
Well,
and
it has to be.
It isn't that yet.
Yeah, it has to be 10x better. It's like when you went from Palm Pilot to like iPhone 3G and they had the App Store, like it became clear, like, hey, this thing is actually fundamentally better than any of the kind of handhelds came before it. So I personally think it's like a hardware thing too, as much of a behavioral thing. And I do think if there's any company in the world that's going to figure out the interface problem, it probably is Apple, right? Like they've been kind of masters at.
They also have the force and the brand to shove it down everyone's throats.
Look, I think it's all of that, but I also think it works both ways. Like I think this is how evolution works. Like we got, like flip phones to, Blackberries and then iPhone, but it has to approach both ways. And I think when the iPhone first came out, people were like, "Oh my God, games on the iPhone! What the?" Touching, like people were playing Snake on the cell phone, and people are still complaining about games on. And now people are like, "Yeah, sure, games." I think games on the iPhone and Android devices are the bulk of the industry. Like 70% of the industry is revenue generated through these devices. And so I think it's like it's going to go both ways. Like technology is going to go one way, and it's going to be built by the old guard. And then software is also going to be built, and then they're going to hit like a wall oftentimes. And then on the other side, a young generation grows up and they're like, I'm going to use this in a way that you've never thought of. And I'm going to start building, when I come of age, I want to start building it in this way. And I think, by the way, this is true of almost everything I've seen in the world, right? Like game adaptations required people who love playing games to be old enough to now be in the industry to build things like Last of Us or Super Mario or Arcane. Like it took like generations for people who love games to actually express in those mediums, right? Because everybody tried to adapt before and it didn't work. So I think it's just like it's gonna work both ways. At some point, you're gonna hit an equilibrium, and then it becomes normal. It becomes it just becomes cultural.
Yeah, I think the Google Home thing that you brought up is really interesting because I think a lot of kids are going to grow up with like they might not even be using search, right? They might be just using like
your kids are going to go straight to ChatGPT or Bard. I've been testing recently, forcing myself to use Bard as my default search instead of like Google, and comparing against like things I recently searched, like top whatever restaurants in a certain place, and I'm like, it's
pretty good,
80% there. It's like pretty good already. And so just imagining it getting even better is like where it can intuit like what you want to do next and stuff. Yeah.
That interface,
the phone thing,
the rabbit,
the rabbit thing. I just saw that.
Really well, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like,
I mean, that's effectively what that Bard abstraction is like. The aggregate. It's like basically instead of me opening up the 30 tabs, it does it, and then it just aggregates it up until like that level.
So dope was, and I'm sure like Apple and Siri is going to do this, but effectively like when he demoed the sort of like Excel, like he just took a picture of the Excel, and he's like just told it to like like, you know, like he just pulled whatever data out, like redid the tables. Like, I mean,
this is what Bard and ChatGPT is already doing like right now. Like, but Bard, like that's like, how exactly how I want to use it.
But it's within a device where you're taking a picture. You're not taking a picture with Bard, right? Like necessarily, right?
So
that's what I'm saying.
You do. You know how they have Google Lens? Yeah, you know how you Google Lens, and it's like translate this thing, or like, where do I buy this product? And it'll start doing that. Yeah.
Is it on Apple yet, or just Google right now?
It's a website, so you can just go to a browser.
So you just go on a website and do it.
You just go to Chrome.
Yeah. No, but I just think these interfaces are gonna like go to rapid iteration at this point, like because of AI. Like in the future, AI is gonna be in everything, right? Let's just assume that your chair is gonna have AI. Like it's just gonna talk to each other. It's just gonna know you so well, right? Like and my daughters are like all in, like everything is like, you know, I showed it to them once and then they're just like, they're off to the races. It's so easy. Like, it's like, they won't remember a time before it. I'm pretty
you know, one thing
because I don't remember a time before, even though internet, you know, internet was right before I went to college. I really don't remember a time before internet. Like it's
where you had all the information accessible, you just need to know what to do to search it. But now it's like for kids growing up now. The kids growing up now, it's not even, you don't even type and go to Google. You can just like talk and say something, an incomplete idea, and then it will know exactly what you're talking about and find the thing that you're looking for. And
there's
so
one thing adjacent to this that it makes me think of that is an underlying aspect or an adjacent aspect where for all this stuff to work, it needs your data to work better. Yeah. Now, there are some of our friends who are like super data sensitive and they're like, you know, this is my data, and like, you know, they don't want the ads and they don't want Google to like know all their stuff. So I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I'm like, you don't think Apple's doing this too? But our kids, not just on that stuff, but including social media, there's so much more natural, transparency is so much more natural to them, or a given. And we'll see of all the good, or they don't care about it. And we don't know the full extent of like good or bad of that, but that's the norm. But it coincides with the data necessary for this stuff to work better.
Personalization.
Which it's interesting because maybe this could only happen as after the prerequisite of people being okay giving up their data. Yeah. Which is, it's
just like a super accelerant that's it's gonna happen. But the exciting part is just like I think we all, anybody who thinks that like phones are the final form of human interface is nuts, right? Like I've met people who are just like, I'm like, that's like, it's a stepping stone, you know? Like it's weird because, you know, like the first iPhone was 2007, right? Like it's not even that long ago.
Not that long ago,
yeah. It's really not that long ago, and I think it's gonna get. I mean, Neuralink's around the corner. Like there's all this stuff that's coming, and people are gonna. Yeah, and I think people are gonna really be experimental. Like I think the Rabbit's like just V1 of like, and then the Vision Pro, like all these interface tests are gonna be just out of
Yeah.
control.
No,
And I'm super
yeah,
excited.
it'll probably be like the Ray Ban, the Facebook's Ray Bans, like something like that, right? Where it's like seamless and it's like all the software is
Oh yeah.
easy to
Oh
wear.
for sure. And
I
and
mean,
and
again,
I
I
think it's
wanted to
gonna
be
be
Matrix. Put it all the way until it's a chip in my brain, and as long as I can trust that I'm not going to get hacked by some other country, like I'll
it's
go
too
for it,
late.
go
You're already
nuts. Just
hacked.
make everything easier for me.
Because
There's gonna be all those people who are like not in my brain, and there's gonna be all the in my brain people.
In
Like
my
it's gonna be
brain,
really
yeah.
interesting. The divide, the great divide.
That's going to be the Borg, and then everyone else, the free thinkers.
last question, since you guys we've been talking a lot about interfaces, have you guys seen anything like new or exciting around the AI LLM stuff? Like, is there anything like from a game perspective that you think has like really stood out that could be like a new type of genre or paradigm shift? Um,
I think the most exciting for me in AI, and I think it's still under resourced and under invested, is robotics. I just think there's just not enough. I just think this is gonna be such a game changer. Like I sent, I think I sent Steven and some of our friends like the robot that sort of hovers around your house. It's like it's like a Roomba that flies, and there's no propellers. It's all with. It looks like a Metal Gear like drone. Like
Like
that
frisbee,
that
yeah.
makes sure your house is safe. And I'm like, holy cow! Like this could be used for so many things, like out of control, right? I just think robotics is really excited. On the game side, I think the most exciting. I think like I personally think that all the generative stuff like is gonna get to the ones that will survive will be multimodal because everybody just doesn't want to have to go to like a text thing and an image thing and an animation thing, and I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be like one thing that does all of it, but it's likely gonna be a race to the bottom
There's
because it's gonna be trained on the same data, you know.
Yeah.
And then and I really do think it's gonna be offline too. Like I think there's gonna be stuff that's gonna come out that's gonna be so good that's like on a 2 gig hard drive, like, and you can use the entire information of the world without you know without like having to connect to the internet. I think that's one. And two, I think the stuff that I think is going to be most interesting will end up being like uh, coding. I think everybody's going to be really good at coding.
yeah,
Like I think your coders will get to 10x coders very quickly. I think it's. I mean, like
less
there's
developers needed.
there's. I
It
mean,
takes no
less
code to a
developers
different
that
level.
actually like. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's going to be bananas because like code will be really clean.
Yeah.
It would be like perfect. It would be totally scalable. It will be. I mean, like you can literally do almost anything now, and it's like V0.1. Like what's 2-3 years from now? I think that's what's gonna happen. Like, yeah, I
I
think
think
that's gonna be the biggest impact for
you
gaming,
know,
for game development.
admittedly, this is a very like stepping stone idea, or stepping. What I'll mention is a stepping stone version of something that might manifest later. That our skeptical team, along with me, are closest to being excited about is what can we do to better use and process live data towards modifying the experience within our game. I'll just summarize that as like the concept of being a dungeon master.
Or like a real time game
So,
designer.
yeah, basically, so normally we design the game, and then the lag between their response and our iteration at best is what, every other week of updates, right? But imagine live, like I know that Thomas went to go rob Jason, so like the bartender sends a bunch of quests, and now like I and Brian go and like raid Thomas because then we know that he's not home because the quest giver told us that like Thomas is doing something bad, and like like doing something that like a live dungeon master would do. But obviously we cannot individually be there to host on all servers, but an AI could mimic those things, or from a roster or a menu of like quests or behaviors, like and push out on the people given certain triggers in the world. Something like that is like
Yeah.
more
We're,
possible than ever before.
Yeah, within the game, I think a lot of it, I describe it as like personalization, which is like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
game
It's a
knows.
version of personalization. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it's like the game knows you, the NPCs know you. They not only know you, but they know you, you
Yeah.
know, and they might even know you from all your other games that you played, you know, and then it becomes
That's like the big
incredible.
version.
Well,
I'm doing the
that's
little
Yeah,
version.
that's Blade Runner,
Like
right?
what do we know you did in the last 24 hours? I'm at that level, but yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. No, I think all that's gonna come for sure because it's actually in many ways like even before like all the AI craze, like Google knows you and Apple knows you and Facebook knows you better than you know you.
Yeah.
Like probably even subconsciously, if somebody asks me what's my favorite color, I have a couple favorite colors, but I bet Google really knows what my favorite color is
Yeah. Yeah.
based on the pixels that I click on with the ads that they put in front of me. You know?
Just imagine your calendar as like your quest log, and then you tell Bard one day like, Google, I'm bored. And then it starts adding stuff to you, like to your
Yeah.
itinerary, and like, go here, show up here, do
Here,
this thing,
I
and you don't know at some point which is real and which is like made up for you, and what it's coordinating
well
between other
that to
people
me
too. Like,
reminds me of
how
like
crazy is that?
remember back in the day they had that
The movie?
EA I think made a game that was
Oh,
like
oh, the
very
AR game. Yeah,
intimate.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
where they
It was
fly.
around the game. I don't know if it was related to it, but remember the movie, The Game, or is it
Yeah,
Michael Douglas or something like that? Like for his birthday,
yeah.
like he
No,
there's
no,
a whole
literally
made up game,
like that
but
version that you described, Sean,
driven by
like
AR. Yeah.
if somebody is like, man, I'm feeling bored, like plan me a weekend. Like that's we're not that far from that.
Oh no,
It's like
we're
here,
not that far. That exists today. It's
yeah.
just
Yeah.
okay today. It's just gonna
A,
get better. Yeah.
AI therapist is like, well, I booked you a flight to Cabo. You just have to show up at the airport. The driver's there. You know, I ordered DoorDash for you when you land. Like literally, it can be
I can already do that
all done.
today.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
only thing that stops it is, does it have my permission to do it right now? And pretty soon, those barriers will start reducing, and it will just start doing it as if it's
Like
normal.
fine, I give up.
What,
I give
what
in.
about NPCs? Do you think like people will ever like build
Oh,
like connections with
yes.
NPCs and like fall in
Was
love?
that like
and
the
just,
That's yes, 100%.
I mean, absolutely.
100%.
So yes.
100%. Like I've
The Blade Runner, isn't that? Didn't
Yeah,
they
that's
show that in
basically
Blade
Blade
Runner?
Runner,
It's
right?
like you already can see it, right? Yeah.
But look, I mean, like we've even in single player games. I remember when I played Final Fantasy 6 or 3 in the US. It was pixels, and I legit cried when in that opera house scene, you know, with the octopus. Yeah, like literally, like people will connect with. I mean, people dress up as their favorite characters. They connect with them. They connect with shows. Like the whole illusion of entertainment is to like fall in love with it. You know, like and games are the best version of this, right? Games are like you
More
have to
interactive.
believe a game matters for it to be fun.
So what's the
Otherwise, it doesn't.
takeaway from this conversation? Someone out there in your VR VC network, somebody make a Pal World pet companion app that tells you what to do and is your buddy through adventures in life. Go.
Yeah. And by the way, like,
Automatically funded.
given that what you just said, like AI will know you better than you know yourself. It's 100% that some AI NPC is going to be
We'll do
so
that. Yeah.
deeply like resonate with you because it knows you better than you know yourself.
yeah. Well, and then the other thing is like these. This is like what you guys said. These things could, in theory, last forever, right? So it's like they're basically they're like a pseudo living thing at that point.
Did you guys watch Her?
Her is happening.
Her.
Yeah, Her.
Yeah,
It's like,
Her.
it's like the perfect
Actually,
example. Just go and
it's a
hire
relationship.
Scarlett Johansson to voice
Just
Siri,
the voice.
and then combine with Bard
over.
and win. Yeah.
Yeah, society's over.
That's
All
happening.
all the single guys are going to be single forever because they'll all just be married to the NPC.
Oh
Isn't
yeah,
that already happening in Japan?
yeah, and then baby incubators and all that stuff. Hey, we literally are like that movie. There was that movie with Bruce Willis where everybody's they're in pods and they control like AI humans.
Fifth
Or-
Yeah,
Element?
this is super familiar.
No.
No, not Fifth Element.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Slim?
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
super
Jason.
familiar.
It literally like that's why I'm like the whole robotics thing. Like I'm very interested to see like everything from Boston Robotics to what Elon's doing to like if you look at I think Amazon most of the I saw a video of a factory in Amazon. There was no people. It was all
Yeah,
robots.
It's already. Yeah.
And it was like robots that were like robots, and there were robots that were like humanoids, just like carrying around boxes and stuff. Like what?
Yeah, but we already know the limitation to this. All you got to do is walk 100 feet away from a wall plug, and you're good. Power is gonna stop all this. There's nobody worked on batteries.
Until they use solar, and then solar fusion.
Fusion.
Fun.
Cool. Well, yeah. Thank you guys for hopping on. Yeah, great conversation, and we'll figure out some other time to bring you guys back to chat about some other new fun topics. Maybe right after, a couple months after this Vision Pro actually launches and everyone uses my one.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, we'll see.
You didn't have one on order, Thomas?
You know, I was so lame.
Maybe Brandon got one.
We have one. I have one. Yeah, I have one that's coming.
Like
I think it's coming in March.
Let us try after.
I'm getting a dev kit one, so I didn't need to get one.